Let me tell you about Jake Morrison, also known as Tank, though not for any reasons involving armor or toughness. No, Jake earned that nickname after accidentally driving a training mech through 3 walls, 2 classrooms, and one very expensive holographic projector on his first day at the Galactic Military Academy. The nickname stuck, mostly because Commander Vextar kept muttering "human tank" every time Jake walked into a room, and it wasn't meant as a compliment. The Galactic Military Academy was supposed to be the crown jewel of interstellar education, where the brightest minds from across the galaxy came to learn the art of warfare. Floating majestically in the Andromeda sector, it boasted facilities that could simulate any battlefield condition, instructors who had won actual wars, and a student body that represented the absolute elite of their respective species. Then there was Jake. Jake had the unique distinction of being the only cadet in Academy history to fail a theoretical exam on hyperspace navigation. Not the practical exam where you actually had to pilot a ship, mind you, the theoretical one, with multiple choice questions and a calculator. The fact that he somehow managed to select answers that weren't even options on the test form became the stuff of legend among the faculty. Commander Vextar, a imposing reptilian with 4 arms and 0 patience for human incompetence, had drawn the short straw when it came to Jake's tactical training. During their first session, Jake had managed to misunderstand the concept of a flanking maneuver so completely that he'd ordered his simulated troops to flank themselves. The computer had actually crashed trying to process the tactical impossibility. Morrison, Vextar would hiss through his razor-sharp teeth, "Your species conquered your homeworld through sheer dumb luck, didn't they?" Jake, completely missing the insult, would usually respond with something like, "Well, sir, my mom always said I was lucky," which only made Vextar's headache worse. The other cadets had stopped trying to help Jake after the infamous grenade incident during basic weapons training. Jake had been so nervous about the explosives timer that he'd thrown it immediately after pulling the pin, not bothering to aim. The training grenade had bounced off 4 walls, rolled down a ventilation shaft, and somehow ended up in the Academy's main computer core, where it harmlessly detonated and triggered a full system reboot that took 3 days to fix. But Jake's crowning achievement in failure came during the Advanced Strategic Simulation course. While his classmates manipulated complex holographic battle scenarios with the precision of master tacticians, Jake had somehow managed to get his virtual army lost in their own base. Not captured, not defeated. Literally lost. The simulation had to be terminated when his troops started asking for directions from the enemy forces. Yet somehow, despite being the Academy's most spectacular failure, Jake Morrison remained cheerfully optimistic about his future in galactic defense, which, as it turned out, was exactly what the galaxy needed. The emergency klaxons woke the entire Academy at 03:00 hours, which was never a good sign. Even worse was the sight of Admiral Korthak himself materializing in the main briefing hall via emergency hologram. The 8-foot-tall, crystalline admiral only appeared in person for 2 reasons: major promotions or major catastrophes. Given the time and his expression, this wasn't about promotions. The Admiral's voice resonated through the hall like grinding stone. The Zephyrian Empire has launched coordinated attacks on Kepler 442 billion, New Geneva, and the Tau Ceti mining colonies. 3 worlds, simultaneous strikes, complete communications blackout. This is not a drill. The assembled cadets exchanged worried glances. The Zephyrians were known for their methodical approach to warfare, their technological superiority, and their unfortunate habit of turning conquered worlds into parking lots. They didn't attack 3 targets at once unless they were very confident about winning. "You will be divided into tactical assessment groups," the Admiral continued. "Each group will analyze the situation and propose a military response. Consider this your final examination." Jake found himself assigned to Tactical Pod 7, along with Clix, a mantis-like Ceridian whose compound eyes could process battlefield data faster than most supercomputers, and more Pool, a blob like Kellion who had never lost a strategic simulation. Jake was pretty sure he'd been placed with the smart kids so they could carry him, which was fine by him. Clix immediately began analyzing the attack patterns, her clicking mandibles a rapid-fire percussion as she processed data. "The strikes are too coordinated for random aggression," she chittered. This suggests months of preparation, detailed intelligence gathering, and a comprehensive understanding of our defensive capabilities. Morpool's gelatinous form shifted colors as he thought, cycling through various shades of tactical consideration. Agreed. The Zephyrians have studied our military doctrine extensively. They know exactly how we'll respond to each scenario. Traditional flanking maneuvers, siege tactics, fleet positioning, they've seen it all. Jake nodded sagely, having understood approximately 30% of what they'd just said. He reached for what he thought was the strategy console but accidentally grabbed the emergency simulation override instead. The tactical display flickered, then blazed to life with a scenario that made both his teammates recoil. Morrison. Clix's voice climbed 3 octaves. You just activated the impossible mode simulation. This scenario is designed to be unwinnable. It's meant to teach cadets about acceptable losses in hopeless situations. Jake stared at the display, which showed overwhelming Zephyrian forces converging on a lone human colony. The odds were calculated at approximately 47,000 to 1 against survival. Oh, he said helpfully. Should I turn it off? No, Morpool said, his color shifting to curious purple. Let's see what happens. Maybe watching a simulation of total defeat will inspire us to think outside conventional parameters. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for decades. Jake, panicking slightly at the hopeless scenario, started making decisions based not on tactical doctrine but on pure human instinct. When the Zephyrian fleet moved to establish a standard blockade pattern, Jake scattered his ships randomly, not in any formation that appeared in any textbook. The simulation AI paused, trying to calculate the strategic purpose of Jake's movements. Finding none, it assumed there must be a deeper plan and began running probability scenarios for what Jake might be attempting. Meanwhile, Jake continued making decisions based on what felt right, completely ignoring the tactical advice screaming at him from the display. This is fascinating, Clix whispered, watching the simulation struggle to predict Jake's next move. The AI can't establish pattern recognition because there is no pattern. It's like watching someone play chess by throwing pieces at the board. Morpool had turned a deep shade of analytical gold. But look at the results. The Zephyrian formations are becoming increasingly erratic as they try to counter movements that make no tactical sense. They're second-guessing themselves. By the time Jake had finished his strategy session, the simulation had declared a stalemate, which was mathematically impossible in impossible mode. The AI had actually developed what could only be described as a digital nervous breakdown trying to process Jake's approach to warfare. "Gentlemen," Jake announced cheerfully, "I think I broke it again." 3 weeks later, the war had gone from bad to catastrophic. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just winning, they were winning so decisively that military historians were already comparing it to the great galactic conflicts of the past. Every standard tactic, every proven strategy, every textbook maneuver had been anticipated and countered with surgical precision. The elite 7th Fleet, pride of the Galactic Alliance, had been destroyed in the Battle of Rigel using a flanking maneuver that had worked flawlessly for 3 centuries. The legendary General Caxmore, winner of the Siege of Vega Prime, had watched his forces get systematically dismantled when he attempted his signature encirclement strategy. It was as if the Zephyrians had studied every military academy curriculum in the galaxy and prepared specific counters for each lesson. Back at the academy, the mood was grim. The top students had volunteered for early deployment, their advanced training fast-tracked to get them into the fight. Clix had graduated summa cum laude and was already serving aboard a tactical cruiser. Morpool had been assigned to fleet intelligence, his strategic mind desperately needed for battle planning. Jake, meanwhile, had been assigned to supply and logistics, which everyone agreed was probably the safest place for him. His job was simple: take supplies from point A to point B without breaking anything expensive. It was considered a role perfectly suited to his unique talents, meaning his complete inability to function in any capacity that required tactical thinking. Jake Morrison. Besides, Commander Vextar had said during his assignment briefing, "Your contribution to this war effort will be keeping our pilots fed and our ships fueled. Do not," under any circumstances, attempt to engage the enemy. Do not deviate from your flight paths. Do not touch anything that isn't clearly labeled as supplies. And for the love of all that's holy, do not try to help. Jake had nodded enthusiastically, genuinely excited about his important role in the war effort. He'd been given a small, outdated cargo ship called the Persistent Nuisance, which seemed oddly appropriate. The ship was equipped with basic shields, minimal weapons, and a navigation computer that had been cutting-edge technology approximately 30 years ago. The thing about Jake, though, was that he had never been particularly good at following directions, not out of rebelliousness, but because he had a remarkable talent for misunderstanding simple instructions. So when his first supply run called for him to deliver medical supplies to Outpost Gamma 7 in the Kepler system, Jake was confident he could handle it. What Jake didn't know was that the Zephyrians had been monitoring supply routes, waiting for the perfect opportunity to capture a logistics vessel and interrogate its crew about fleet movements. They had identified the Persistent Nuisance as an ideal target, small, lightly armed, and crewed by what their intelligence suggested was a single, inexperienced pilot. The Zephyrian patrol that moved to intercept Jake's ship was led by Sub-Commander Thexalon, a tactical genius who had successfully captured 17 supply vessels without firing a shot. His strategy was simple and effective: disable the ship's engines, board it, and extract information before the crew could destroy sensitive data. Unfortunately for Sub-Commander Thexalon, he had based his entire plan on the assumption that his target would behave rationally. Jake Morrison, as the Academy could have told him, was many things, but rational wasn't one of them. When Jake's proximity alarm started blaring, he assumed he'd accidentally flown into an asteroid field again. When he saw the Zephyrian ships on his scanner, he figured they were probably lost and needed directions. And when they started hailing him with demands for surrender, Jake thought they were asking about the cargo manifest. "Oh sure," Jake cheerfully responded over the comm. "I've got medical supplies, food rations, and some kind of experimental engine parts. You guys need anything specific?" The confusion in Sub-Commander Thexalon's voice was audible, even through the universal translator. You are surrendering your cargo." "Well, if you need it," Jake replied. "I mean, I'm supposed to deliver this stuff to Outpost Gamma 7, but if there's an emergency, I guess I could share." And that's when Jake made the decision that would change the course of the war. He accidentally activated the ship's experimental stealth drive while trying to open the cargo bay doors. The experimental stealth drive had been installed on the Persistent Nuisance as a field test, but nobody had bothered to mention this to Jake. The technology was so new that even the engineers weren't entirely sure how it worked. What they did know was that it made ships nearly impossible to detect, even at close range. From Sub-Commander Thexalon's perspective, his target had simply vanished. One moment he was looking at a small cargo vessel piloted by what appeared to be a cooperative, if confused, human. The next moment, his sensors showed empty space. His tactical computer began running diagnostics, convinced that multiple systems had failed simultaneously. From Jake's perspective, he had successfully opened the cargo bay doors and was now looking for the button to activate the loading ramp. The fact that the Zephyrian ships were suddenly flying in frantic search patterns didn't register as particularly unusual. Jake assumed they were looking for something they'd lost. "Hey," Jake called over the comm. "You guys still there? I found the medical supplies, but I can't figure out how to get them to you." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Thexalon's crew exchanged panicked glances. In Zephyrian culture, disembodied voices were associated with ancient legends about vengeful spirits that haunted the void between stars. "Where are you?" Thexalon demanded, his voice betraying the first hints of fear. "Right here," Jake replied, genuinely confused. He was looking directly at the Zephyrian ships, close enough to see their weapon arrays. "Unlike maybe 100 meters from your lead ship. Can't you see me?" This was too much for the Zephyrian patrol. An invisible ship crewed by a being that claimed to be right here while remaining completely undetectable was beyond their tactical training. When Jake accidentally bumped his throttle and the stealth ship's engines flared to life, The energy signature appeared on their sensors like a ghost materializing from the void. Thexalon made a command decision that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He ordered a full retreat. "Wait, where are you going?" Jake called after them, but the Zephyrian ships were already jumping to hyperspace. "I still have your medical supplies." News of the encounter spread through both fleets like wildfire. The Zephyrian version described a terrifying encounter with an invisible demon ship that could appear and disappear at will, crewed by spirits that offered medical aid in voices that echoed from the void itself. The human version was considerably more confused, consisting mainly of Jake's after-action report, which began with, "I think I met some aliens who were really bad at giving directions." But Jake's war was just getting started. His next supply run took him to the Vega system, where he promptly got lost trying to find the correct space station. His outdated navigation computer had directed him to coordinates that had been accurate 30 years ago, before the station had been moved to a safer orbit. While searching for his destination, Jake stumbled into the middle of a Zephyrian flanking maneuver. A full squadron of enemy fighters was moving into position to ambush a human patrol, using an asteroid field for cover. Jake, still invisible thanks to his stealth drive, flew right through their formation. "Excuse me," Jake announced over the general comm frequency. "Has anyone seen Space Station Vega 7? My GPS says it should be right here, but all I see are a bunch of asteroids and some ships that look like they're playing hide and seek." The Zephyrian squadron leader nearly choked on his breathing apparatus. An enemy ship had somehow penetrated their formation without being detected, and now it was taunting them over open channels. The tactical implications were terrifying. If the humans had developed stealth technology this advanced, every Zephyrian strategy would need to be reconsidered. "Human vessel." The squadron leader transmitted, "You are surrounded. Surrender immediately." "Surrounded by what?" Jake asked, genuinely curious. "I mean, there are a bunch of ships here, but I figured you guys were on the same side. You're all flying in the same direction." The squadron leader made the mistake of trying to explain their tactical position. "We are executing a pincer movement on the human patrol approaching from Vector 77 Mark IV. Your forces are walking into our trap." Jake's response would be studied in military academies for generations. "Oh, that's not good." "Hey, human patrol guys, there are some people here who want to pincer you from Vector 777 Mark IV. You might want to do something about that." The human patrol, already on high alert, immediately changed course and called for reinforcements. The Zephyrian ambush, which had taken hours to set up, was neutralized in 30 seconds by a lost supply pilot who thought he was being helpful. But Jake wasn't finished. As the Zephyrian fighters scrambled to reposition, he decided to try a different approach to finding the space station. He activated what he thought was a sensor sweep but was actually the ship's experimental weapon system. The blast, intended for testing against asteroid targets, tore through the Zephyrian formation like a hot knife through butter. "Whoops," Jake announced over the comm. "Sorry about that. I was trying to scan for the space station. Is everyone okay?" 3 Zephyrian fighters had been vaporized. The surviving ships were in full retreat, transmitting panicked reports about an invisible superweapon that could destroy entire squadrons while apologizing for the inconvenience. Jake finally found Space Station Vega 7 4 hours later, in completely the wrong star system. But by then, word of the mysterious human pilot was spreading through both fleets, and Subcommander Thexalon was demanding hazard pay. Admiral Korthak stared at the intelligence report scattered across his desk, his crystalline features reflecting the light in patterns that suggested deep confusion. 3 separate encounters with the same human pilot, 5 Zephyrian ships destroyed, 2 enemy squadrons routed, 1 supply delivery completed successfully, though 4 hours late and in the wrong star system. "Let me understand this correctly," he said to his aide, Commander Vextar, who had been summoned to explain the human phenomenon. "Cadet Morrison, the same individual who failed theoretical hyperspace navigation, has single-handedly disrupted more enemy operations than our entire Third Fleet." Vextar's forearms gestured in what could only be described as cosmic resignation. "Admiral, I've been trying to make sense of this for weeks. Morrison's tactical reports read like fever dreams. In his last encounter, he claims to have given the enemy directions to an ambush site because he thought they were lost. And this somehow resulted in the destruction of an entire Zephyrian attack wing? Apparently, sir. The enemy forces became so confused by his actions that they ended up firing on each other. Morrison's report states, and I quote, "Things got pretty loud after that, so I left to find a quieter place to eat my sandwich." Admiral Thak began pacing, his massive form casting shifting shadows across the briefing room. "Commander, I need you to explain something to me. How is it possible that our most incompetent cadet has become our most effective weapon?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Quillen, the Academy's xenobiology specialist, had been quietly analyzing the data from a different angle. "Admiral, if I may, I believe the issue isn't Morrison's competence, but rather our fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology." Explain. "Earth is what we classify as a death world, Admiral. A planet where survival requires constant adaptation to unpredictable threats. Civilized species evolved on worlds where cooperation and predictable behavior provided advantages. Humans evolved on a world where the ability to improvise and adapt to chaos was the difference between life and death." Bextar's tail twitched in annoyance. "Dr. Quillen, Morrison can't even operate a standard tactical console without breaking it." "Exactly my point, Commander. We've been trying to train humans to think like us, to follow established patterns and protocols. But Morrison represents something more fundamental, a human operating on pure instinct, without the overlay of formal military training that constrains his natural abilities." Admiral Thak stopped pacing. "You're suggesting that by failing to train him properly, we accidentally created the perfect weapon?" "I'm suggesting that humans may be naturally suited to the kind of unpredictable warfare that the Zephyrians can't counter. They've spent decades studying our military doctrine, but they've never encountered a species that approaches combat like a Deathworlder, chaotic, adaptive, and completely unpredictable." The implications were staggering. If Dr. Quillen was correct, then the galaxy's most advanced military academies had been training humans wrong from the beginning. The discipline and structure that worked for other species might actually be counterproductive for a species that had evolved to thrive in chaos. "Admiral," Vextar said slowly, "there's something else. Morrison isn't unique. We have 47 other human cadets who have been struggling with conventional training. They all share similar characteristics: poor performance in structured scenarios, tendency to break equipment, and complete inability to follow standard protocols. Are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we might have been looking at this backwards, sir. What if Morrison isn't our worst student? What if he's our most successful example of untrained human potential?" Admiral Thak made a decision that would change the course of the war. "Commander Vextar, I want you to assemble a squadron of our most unsuccessful human cadets. Give them ships, basic equipment, and minimal instruction, then turn them loose on the Zephyrian fleet." "Sir, with respect, that sounds like a recipe for disaster." "Commander," the Admiral said, his voice carrying the weight of desperate hope, "disaster is exactly what we need. The Zephyrians have counters for all of our successful strategies. It's time to try failure." 2 days later, Jake Morrison found himself promoted to squadron leader, a rank he was pretty sure he hadn't earned. His squadron consisted of 12 other humans who had been considered unsuitable for regular military service. Their first briefing was unlike anything in Academy history. "Okay, everyone," Jake announced to his new squadron. "I'm not really sure what we're supposed to do, but apparently we're good at it. So let's just go out there and try not to break anything too expensive." From the back of the room, Pilot Chen raised her hand. "Jake, what if we do break something expensive?" Jake considered this seriously. "Well, I guess we'll apologize and see if we can fix it." It was the most unconventional military doctrine in galactic history. It was also about to win the war. The final battle of the Zephyrian War took place in the Proxima system, where the enemy had positioned their command ship, the inevitable victory, in what they considered an impregnable defensive formation. The ship was protected by overlapping shield generators, surrounded by 3 layers of defensive satellites, and supported by the most experienced tactical commanders in the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Korthak's strategy was simple: send in Jake's squadron of human failures and see what happened. There was no backup plan, no coordinated fleet action, no carefully orchestrated tactical maneuver. Just 12 humans in outdated ships, flying into what military analysts agreed was certain death. Jake's squadron approached the enemy formation with all the coordination of a group of tourists who had gotten separated from their guide. Pilot Chen immediately got lost and started flying in circles, and Pilot Rodriguez accidentally activated his distress beacon, which began broadcasting his grandmother's cookie recipe. Pilot Kim somehow managed to fly backwards while insisting he was going forward. The Zephyrian commanders watched this approach with growing confusion. Their tactical computers couldn't identify any recognizable formation or strategy. The human ships seemed to be moving randomly, with no apparent coordination or purpose. Sub-Commander Thexalon, the fleet commander, transmitted, "What is your analysis of this enemy formation?" Thexalon, who had been promoted after his encounters with Jake, studied the sensor data with growing unease. "Commander, I don't believe this is a formation. I think they're just flying around." "That's impossible. No military force would approach a fortified position without a tactical plan." "Sir, with respect, these are the same humans I've encountered before. Tactical planning may not be their strong suit." As if to prove his point, Jake's voice crackled over the general comm frequency. "Hey everyone, I think we're supposed to attack that big ship over there. The one that looks like it's wearing too much jewelry." "Jake," Ken Chen's voice, "I can't find the big ship. Are you sure it's there?" "Yeah, it's right in front of us. It's huge. How can you miss it?" "Oh, that thing. I thought that was a space station." The Zephyrian fleet commander was beginning to understand why his forces had been losing battles. The humans weren't following any known tactical doctrine because they didn't seem to know any tactical doctrine existed. "All units," the commander ordered, "prepare for standard anti-fighter formation. We'll eliminate them quickly and efficiently." This was exactly the wrong decision. The Zephyrian ships moved into a textbook defensive pattern, one that had successfully repelled hundreds of coordinated attacks. Unfortunately, Jake's squadron wasn't coordinated, wasn't following any attack pattern, and definitely wasn't textbook. When the Zephyrians opened fire, expecting the humans to scatter or retreat, Jake's response was typical. "Wow, that's pretty. Are those fireworks? Is it someone's birthday?" Jake Rodriguez called out, "I think they're shooting at us." "Really? Why would they do that? We haven't done anything yet." "Maybe they're scared." "They're scared? Was they? Leave us? That's silly. We're just here to say hello." The Zephyrian gunners, trained to target ships following predictable evasive maneuvers, found themselves shooting at pilots who seemed to be sightseeing. Jake was flying in slow loops, apparently admiring the scenery. Chen was still lost, flying in random directions while asking for directions. Kim was somehow flying sideways, insisting that his ship was broken. "This is impossible," muttered the Zephyrian gunnery officer. "They're not evading. They're not attacking. They're just meandering around like they're on a pleasure cruise." That's when Jake accidentally discovered the enemy fleet's critical weakness. While trying to get a better look at the inevitable victory, he flew directly through the overlapping fields of the shield generators. The shields, designed to repel coordinated attacks, weren't programmed to handle a single ship wandering through them like a lost tourist. "Hey guys," Jake announced, "I think I found a hole in their shields. It's right here between the big spinny things." "Where?" asked Chen, who was still completely lost. "Just follow the pretty lights. They lead right to the big ship." What followed was less a battle than a cosmic comedy of errors. Jake's squadron, following his directions, stumbled through the shield gap one by one. The Zephyrian defenders, expecting a coordinated assault, had no protocols for dealing with individual ships wandering through their defenses while commenting on the architecture. The inevitable victory itself was a marvel of military engineering, with redundant systems and multiple layers of protection. It was designed to withstand focused attacks from entire fleets. It was not designed to handle 12 humans who had somehow gotten inside its defenses and were now flying around its hull like they were looking for a parking space. Jake Rodriguez called out, "There's a big window here. I can see people inside." "Oh, cool. Wave at them. They don't look very happy. Maybe they're having a bad day. Hey, what's this button do?" Rodriguez had found the emergency airlock release for the ship's command bridge. When he pressed it, curious about its function, the inevitable victory's entire command staff was suddenly dealing with rapid decompression instead of tactical decisions. The war ended not with a climactic battle, but with the Zephyrian fleet commander's formal surrender, transmitted from an emergency life pod while his flagship spun out of control. His final transmission was a plea for mercy delivered to Jake, who was still trying to figure out what had happened. "Human vessels, this is Fleet Commander Zach's tool. We surrender. Please just tell us what you want." Jake's response would be remembered as one of the great diplomatic moments in galactic history. "Oh, hi there. We were just wondering if you guys needed any medical supplies. We've got plenty." 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the stage of the Galactic Military Academy, wearing a dress uniform that didn't quite fit and holding a diploma that still confused him. The ceremony was being broadcast across the galaxy, making him the most famous military graduate in history. In recognition of extraordinary service and tactical innovation, Admiral Korothak announced, "The Academy hereby awards the rank of Admiral to Jake Morrison, along with the Order of Galactic Merit and the title of Supreme Strategic Advisor for Unconventional Warfare." Jake leaned toward the microphone. "Thanks, everyone. I'm still not entirely sure what I did, but I'm glad it worked out. Also, does anyone know where I'm supposed to park my ship? The parking signs here are really confusing." The audience of military dignitaries, alien ambassadors, and former enemies erupted in what could only be described as affectionate laughter. The human who had failed every test, broken every rule, and violated every principle of military science had somehow become the galaxy's greatest tactical genius. As Jake left the stage, still waving to the crowd and looking slightly bewildered by the whole experience, Commander Vextar turned to Admiral Korothak. "Sir, what are we going to do when the next war starts?" Admiral Korothak watched Jake accidentally walk into a door while trying to exit the stage. "Commander, I think we're going to be just fine. After all, we've learned the most important lesson in galactic warfare. Never underestimate a species that still argues about whether hot dogs are sandwiches." And somewhere in the audience, the Zephyrian peace delegation nodded in solemn agreement, having spent the last 6 months trying to understand human cuisine and failing as completely as they had failed to understand human warfare. The galaxy was safe, defended by the most unlikely heroes imaginable, a species so unpredictable that even they didn't know what they were going to do next.